Welcome to Muskegon Rising, a community service project of the Muskegon Rotary Club. Our purpose is to create lasting positive change. We've been doing that here since 1916. So, let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to Muskegon Rising. I am Emily Morgenstern, your host for this episode, and I am honored to have Marisela Sierra here from Navarro's Mexican Takeout.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you guys.
So Mari, let's start off. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am Muskegon born and raised, right here at Hockley Hospital. I graduated from Orchard View. I grew up at Navarro's, so Navarro's has been family owned and operated long before my time. And I grew up in the kitchen and was that kid who complained way too much about being there. And my mom really encouraged me to follow my dreams, whatever I wanted to do. So I went off to school. I graduated from Aquinas College in Grand Rapids. Got my first big girl job in the Grand Rapids area and started planting my own roots there. And I was pretty confident that I was never going to move back to Muskegon. Like if you would have bet me my bottom dollar, I would have said, absolutely not. I'm never moving home. But then things changed. My mom passed from leukemia in 2020. And at that time, it was about deciding whether or not to continue with our family business. And I was actually very hesitant at the beginning. I was like, nope, I want to retire from my current job. I want to stay here. I love having benefits and profit sharing. But my husband said that we had to give it a try. My mom worked so hard to keep the business going. So in 2021 is when we reopened after her passing. And I'm officially a Muskegon. I live here again. I'm a resident, and I've just been so happy to move back and to be raising my kids here. It's been a full circle journey, but I'm so happy that this is the way that things have worked out.
Well, we are so happy that you are back here in Muskegon.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about the history of Navarro's. So your grandparents started it.
Yes.
1978, right? Yeah. So you're third generation owner.
I am.
So let's talk about a little bit how Navarro's looked back when your grandparents opened it.
So back in the 70s, there wasn't a lot. Muskegon looked very different. Muskegon is so diverse and it's becoming so culturally rich. But in the 70s, there wasn't a lot of places for people to find staples for a Mexican kitchen. So they opened a grocery store. So produce, meat, my grandparents were music lovers, so they sold cassettes and records. This was way before me, so I've heard stories of they sold alcohol back then too. But the hot food that started there was tamales. So tamales have been a staple of Navarro since the 70s. As you said, I'm third generation owner. So when my mom grew up, she graduated from Muskegon Catholic. She decided college wasn't for her. So she actually purchased the business from my grandparents when she was just 18 years old. It's a part of her story that I never really appreciated until now, because how do you run a business when you were just 18 years, you're a kid still when you're 18 years old? But she transitioned from grocery and some hot food to completely takeout, only hot food in the 90s. So it's changed so much. And she injected some personality into it. And now that I'm there, I'm injecting some of my personality into it. So it's changed drastically.
All right. So Mari, your story about being from here, growing up here, and wanting to move away and not come back. I have a similar story like that, and a lot of people do. So walk me through, now that you're back here, what are your thoughts? I mean, obviously, with your mom's passing, you're carrying on her legacy as well as your grandmother's. So just tell me a little bit about that change of heart that you had.
Muskegon looks so different from when I left. So I left straight out of high school. So that was in 2008. Back then, the only thing that was interesting to me about living in Muskegon was being so close to the water. So in the summertime, I worked at JCPenney when I was in college, and I would leave my JCPenney job at the mall and go straight to the beach. And that was the only thing that I thought was remotely interesting about living here. But now I'm excited to invite my friends to come see me. Our downtown has completely changed. I'm just so excited to show my Grand Rapids friends, like, you guys have never had Scribs. Like, we need to try Scribs pizza. And like Navarro's, I'm so proud to say, is like a staple. So many people who have moved away, they come and see me when they come see their family. And I'm so honored to be on the same level as Scribs Pizza. Like, it makes me so happy. So it's just, things have changed and they're continuing to grow. And there's this just new energy amongst people my age who are excited to be here and excited to see it grow and excited for the next 5 years. I've been seeing some images like that were in the news about what Muskegon might look like in 5 years, and it's incredible. And I'm so excited that I'm already here. Like, I don't have to think about moving back home in 5 years. I'm here and I get to experience this change.
It's exciting. You definitely can feel the next generation is taking over the reins in our community. So let's talk about, you and your husband Felix, you've owned Navarro's now for 3 years. So talk about some of the changes that you guys have made since reopening.
I can't believe that 3 years have gone by this fast. I feel like I blinked and here we are 3 years later. But when we took over Navarro's, we just very much picked up the ball and kept running with it. So nothing changed. Like, when we reopened, we wanted people to have the confidence in our brand and our product. So when we reopened 3 years ago, literally nothing changed. So same containers, like same prices. Like, I was like, I want people to know it's still us. But in those 3 years, my confidence in the brand and myself as a business owner has changed. So we have a website. So like we didn't have a website.
Yeah.
We have
online ordering.
Online ordering.
Super convenient.
Yeah. So online ordering. Not too long ago, you could Google Mexican food in Muskegon and we wouldn't even show up. Being that we've been serving this community for almost 50 years, you would think we would show up, but we didn't. There's just so many things that I'm proud of that we've accomplished in these 3 years. And just getting outside of our community. So Muskegon Heights is our home, and we are what we are because of the residents of Muskegon Heights. 3 generations of owners have been there, but 3-4 generations of customers have been coming to us. And it's beautiful, but we also need to continue to grow. So it's been about connecting with people outside of our bubble and our loyal customers and getting them to try us and become repeat customers. And so just trying different things. And it's so satisfying to me when I meet someone for the first time and they finally come in, and like, we have a new customer who she recently tried us and has been in once a week since then. And she's like, and I don't think I'm going to stop. I'm addicted. And I'm just like, oh, thank you so much. And so it's just been about bringing Navarro's to this century because we've just very much been a mom and pop shop for so long.
I love that you're still serving that dedicated customer base that, your grandparents and your mom continued. But I also think, to be honest, I grew up here in Muskegon area, but I didn't know about Navarro's until I met you probably a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Because I feel like you've done a really good job about catering as well.
Yeah.
And also networking. So it's really exciting to see a new generation of customers. And talking about that, because I feel like you're everywhere. I can't go to a community event and not run into you, which I love because I always love seeing you and talking with you. Talk to me a little bit about your previous experience. You were in finance, correct?
I was, yeah.
How has that experience helped you now as a small business owner?
Man, that is actually probably one of my weaknesses as a business owner, is the finances. And like, that's been my struggle. And it's a generational struggle. My mom especially was a wonderful business owner. Like, she would come in, she would know your family, your kids, your order. And like, she did a wonderful job of like communicating how the kids were, me and my brother, how we were doing. So like, as we've taken over, I try to tell customers our story and they're like, we already know, like, your mom kept us up to date. But when it came to like managing her business, she was the worst, like the absolute worst. And this was not part of my plan. Like, my latest job was at Gordon Food Service. I worked in their headquarters. I was going to retire from GFS. It was a family-owned business, so like many parallels. But I was ready to retire from there. And my decision making was very much, like entry level still decision making for the organization. So now it's me making long term and goals, like can we absorb this debt? Like, can we handle that? Can we hire someone, and how much can we pay them? And all these decisions that I was never responsible for in corporate America. And if I made a mistake for them, like, I could still go home and sleep well at night because it wasn't coming out of me and my kids, travel fund, for example. So it's been a learning process. But I think those same strengths that my mom had are a lot of the strengths that I had, like just building connections with people and just getting to know our community. But the community involvement goes beyond my mom. My grandmother was a Rotarian. She was passionate about Muskegon. She was passionate about the Latino community, and she did really amazing things for this community and was always, I think you see me a lot, like my grandma was literally everywhere. So I think these things that they have, the beautiful parts of them, those are the parts that I've gotten, and those are the parts that I enjoy flexing the most.
Yeah, so I know your grandma was definitely involved really deep into the entire Muskegon County community. And I don't know about you, but growing up here, because my grandparents were involved, my parents were involved, they'd be like, oh, you're Roger's daughter or you're Richard's granddaughter. And it's like, no, I'm Emily. Like, I'm me. And it wasn't until probably a couple years ago I realized, I was like, I'm so thankful that I had family that was so involved and so loved and well respected in the community. So I don't know if you've had any similar things where you're trying to be Mari, but then also have that respect and that gratitude towards your family.
I'm so thankful, especially to my grandmother, for the stepping stones that she laid out, not just for me, but for all Latinos in Muskegon County. But it is a little bit like really big shoes to fill, because people of her generation, when they meet me, exactly, they're like, oh yeah, you're Connie's daughter. And of course we know you. We know the Navarro name. Of course, of course, of course. And then they go on to list all the boards that she sat on. And they're numerous, and I know I'm going to leave out some, so I won't even try. And they're like, well, you are going to do that, aren't you? But I think the world in which she operated in looks so different than the world that I operate in. Especially in Latino households, there was big families and lots of support. And that's just not my story. I have 2 small kids who, similarly to me, spend way too much time at the restaurant. But I don't have a ton of siblings. I don't have a ton of family. So my time is limited. It's at the restaurant or with them. So boards and all these other events, it can be really hard to juggle. So I don't feel like I'm living up to her legacy quite yet. I used to say when I grow up, and now I say when my kids grow up, then I'm hopeful to be able to do even more.
I do. Well, I know that both your grandmother and your mother would be so proud of everything you're doing right now. But I agree. I think with our generation, we saw our grandparents and our parents so busy. And now we're like, hey, let's find that work-life balance that they were trying to find. And I do think it's so important. I mean, first and foremost, you're a mother and a wife, and you're a business owner. And I think you're doing so much justice to your family's legacy as that business owner.
Thank you.
But also as that mother and that wife. And I think it's important. It's okay to say no, because I feel like, I'm 28, and I feel like I said yes, yes, yes when I moved back to Muskegon when I was 22. And now I'm finally in that position where I can be more strategic about the time and the energy that I'm spending, while also still contributing to that greater community that obviously both hold dear in our hearts.
Yeah, I agree with you so much. When I came back I wasn't living here yet, but when I came back as a business owner to Muskegon, anytime anyone asked me for anything, the answer was yes. Like, yep, I can absolutely do that for you. Yes, I will make time to do that. Yep, you need me to do this? Yes. And I found myself burnt out in less than a year. It was just very overwhelming. And people kept making comments to me like, oh, you're doing this and you're doing that. And I see you everywhere. And like, how do you do it? And like, but no one had taken the time to ask me, are you happy? No one. None of my close friends, no one. They were just like, wow, you're so amazing. And had never taken the time to ask me how I was doing as a person and if I was happy. And I met a woman, she's a leadership coach. And when she approached me, I was like, what does she see? Like, I must be a dumpster fire. Like, why does she think I need to be coached? And I met with her out of professional courtesy initially. And she looked at me and asked me straight in the eyes, are you happy right now? And I started crying. I was like, no, I'm not happy. I'm overworked. I'm overwhelmed. And so we took some time to work together. So I hired her. We started working together in a coaching relationship. And her main goal for me was to identify my values. So peel everything else apart and tell me, for Mari, what is important for you? And growing up in a Latina household, it's God and your family. And that's just how I was raised, and it was ingrained in me. But she wanted me to look beyond that, beyond what was instilled in me and what truly mattered to me. So it wasn't my extended family. It wasn't my cousins, my grandparents, what my parents were going to think about me. She helped me realize that what was most important to me was my kids and my husband, and everything else outside of that. And didn't matter as long as it was them. That was the most important. So we created this roadmap of saying, does this opportunity align with your values? And that was what helped me be more strategic about saying yes and saying no, because I had this checklist in the back of my pocket to say, does this align with my values? And this align with my goals for my business? And if one of those was no, then I couldn't accept it anymore. So it wasn't about saying yes all the time and just being happy, bubbly Mari and overworking myself all the time. It was about, does this make sense for my business and does this make sense for my family? So I feel like I got off on a tangent. Emily, I don't remember the original question.
I think that's so important because I had a similar, it wasn't with a life coach, it was with a therapist. So my mom passed away in 21. And I feel like I was just so involved with like work, but outside of work. And it was like when it came to that point and I was just there with my family, I was like, what do I want my legacy to be when I pass? And I don't want to be that way for that mom that's like their kids or like she's just always working. And it's like, obviously I love working because I love to be busy and I love to be part of the community, but I want to make sure that what I'm doing is fulfilling me. And it really doesn't, you don't understand how overwhelmed and how busy you are until someone actually takes that time and be like, are you happy doing everything? And I had that somewhere moment someone asked me and I'm like, no, not with everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's huge. And I really think that you now as a young leader, and you definitely are a mentor, and I feel like people do look up to you. I think being vulnerable and talking about that personal side of things, especially as a business owner, is going to speak volumes to people because I feel like so many people are going through the same situation, but they're not able to speak up and talk about it. So I think that's great that you can be able to share your story.
I will be the first. I was talking to someone recently and they're like, every time I see you, you say I'm the worst business owner. And it's like, because I'm working on that confidence because we aren't taught in school how to run businesses. We are taught to go to work.
How to be confident.
We're taught to go to work and work for someone else and like how to make these decisions for other people, but we're not taught to do these things for ourselves. But I have been very, very blessed to have women in this community who anytime I've had any question, they're like, yes, girl, we got you. And I think that's really unique because there are other places in the world where if you want someone else's knowledge, you have to pay for it. And everyone's out for themselves. But something that I learned very, very early on, especially in the restaurant industry here in Muskegon, like we all support each other. So if there's an opportunity to connect me with someone for catering or when they're asking for a specific type of food and they know I have it, like they send them my way. But I recognize that that's also been part of my success So even though I jokingly say I'm a terrible business owner and I don't know what I'm doing and I fly by the seat of my pants, I have learned a couple things along the way. And though it might not be much, when someone is wanting to ask me anything, like, yes, I am an open book and I want to make this journey easier for you, because that's how we continue to rise in this community.
And I think that's one of the best characteristics of Muskegon. So obviously we have our natural resources, we have all the development, we have the arts and culture happening. But when I talk to people that have moved to Muskegon that are transplants, the biggest thing, they're like, I stayed in Muskegon because of the people. And I think Muskegon's so good at taking in people. And I think that we work together so great, and it doesn't matter. And Rotary's great for that too. We have people from all walks of life that are part of Rotary, but are able and willing to assist, especially the next generation. I love seeing the elders in our community want to help us younger people. And I think that's just, you can't really advertise that, you know? You have to really experience it for yourself. And I think that's what sets Muskegon apart from the other lakeshore communities, that they might have the same things, but it's our people, I think, that care for one another.
It's been, I say weird for lack of a better word, like moving home, because when I lived in Grand Rapids, I would go grocery shopping and I wouldn't run into a single soul. And now here I can't go anywhere without like, oh, hey, how are you? So we are growing, but we still are very much a small community. And my husband is not a Muskegon native. He's not a Michigan native. So we spent a lot of his adult life in Grand Rapids. But now that he's here, I thought it was going to be a hard transition for him. And he's like, I love it here. And I'm like, what? And he's like, for the same reasons that you just said, like, and because of like the small community, same thing, like running into people, he's like, we're building community here, and it's so much easier to build community here. And people know who we are and know who our kids are, and it's wild to see him enjoy living here so much. And I thought it was going to be like such a weird transition, and he's in love with Muskegon.
I love that. And I think those are things that we take for granted growing up in Muskegon. Because, I'd go to Meyer with my mom, and we'd go in for two things. It'd turn into a 2-hour trip because we'd run into everyone and their mother. And then I lived in Chicago, I lived in Grand Rapids. I loved going out, specifically grocery shopping, not running into people. Yeah. But it's definitely, it's so great. And I'll have friends that will come and visit, and we'll go out. And of course, I'm like talking to everyone. And they love that because they don't have that where they live. And I think it's so important, especially raising kids in that type of environment, knowing that you have people around you, whether they're just acquaintances, that really care about you.
And for the kids, I'm so excited because we've not lived so close to the water before. I jinxed it for winter. I said we were going to go sledding 3 times. This winter was not kind to us. We only made it out once. And we've made a family goal to make it to the beach at least 5 times. We're trying to make it an achievable goal because we're so busy all of the time. So I'm so excited. Like I said, I'm Muskegon born and raised. I had never been to Muskegon State Park. And I just, on a whim, took the kids, I was like, let's go check out this Muskegon State Park. And I fell in love. We, as a family, would always go to Traverse City. When we lived in Grand Rapids, if we wanted to just quick be by the water, we would go up to Traverse and drive through Sleeping Bear. And I'm so happy that I don't have to make that drive this year. I just get to go.
It's a 5-10 minute drive.
I just get to go to Muskegon State Park. And the other day, like you said, finding those things that we value and that we love, and working with my coach, being by the water makes me happy. And so whenever I was feeling sad, I would drag the family up to Traverse just so I could be by the water. And a couple times this year, I've gotten to drop the kids off at school, grab a coffee, and just go sit at Muskegon State Park and just be in nature and be alone with my thoughts and enjoy some coffee. And it's so beautiful that I get to do that. And I only get to do that because I live here. It's
definitely, I'm the same way. Whenever I need to clear my head, I go by the water. Yes. And it brings me peace.
I love it.
So we talked about, obviously there's a lot of exciting things happening in Muskegon, a lot of development, and it is going to look different in 5 years. But I do think what's so important about, or special about Muskegon, is the different small businesses that add to our character. So how do you see, obviously we know what's on the horizon for Muskegon. How do you see Navarro's being a small business, you being a small business owner, fitting into that picture?
I think as Muskegon continues to grow, part of my challenge is to continue to find those people who have lived here their entire lives and have never heard of us. So for me, it's been more a challenge in education and marketing, and I've been having a lot of fun. So part of my job for this year, or a challenge to myself, has been blogging. So I've been posting a weekly, quick little read for our customers and to help us get in front of new and fresh eyes. Beyond that, it's been about exploring maybe a new home for Navarro's or a second location. It's not something that we're super heavily pursuing, but we have thank God, have continued to grow year over year since it's been under my ownership. And anyone who's been to Navarro's knows that it's tiny. It's very small. I don't think it was ever intended to be a restaurant. Our back of the house is like a food truck. So imagine all of the delicious food that you get out of Navarro's is coming out of a kitchen that's no bigger than a food truck. And it served us well, and we continued to work and crank out really great food. But I am hoping that in the next 5 years that kitchen isn't going to serve us anymore and that we will need some more leg room.
And I think that's great because obviously that building is so special, but I feel like it's so important you're growing the business and when that opportunity arises. So obviously you're not actively looking, but if that opportunity arises, you'll seize it.
That's the plan.
All right, Mari, do you have any advice to anyone, whether they're just starting their business now or they're thinking of owning their own business? Any advice to give them?
I think my biggest piece of advice is don't be afraid to ask questions. When I started this journey, I reached out to another woman of color who owned multiple businesses, and I just needed to have a sounding board because I was getting ready to leave my corporate job to take on this new adventure that I had no idea what it was going to look like as a mother. And this woman seemed to have it all, have her businesses, her kids looked so happy, she looked so happy. And my biggest question was, how are you doing this? How are you making this happen? And how can I take this leap? And she graciously accepted my coffee invitation, and we got to sit down, and she spoke words of wisdom into me and poured up herself into me and led me to where we are now. So don't be afraid to ask those questions. Don't be afraid to reach out if you see someone who you think has it all, to say, hey, how are you doing this? Like I said, that's one of the most beautiful parts of Muskegon is that so many of us are willing and open and ready to help you. So reach out, ask those questions. And we have so many champions in this community that I don't think we would have anywhere else. So I think that's something else just to be really prepared for, is that when you're ready to take that leap, you are already going to have so many champions who want to see you succeed, and they're going to be part of that success.
Yeah. And I think that's great. Everyone's so concerned. Obviously, we need to always support our small businesses, but I do think Muskegon is such a great community to keep our small businesses alive and thriving, even with the development that's down the road. Because that's that makes us unique. And I think people that will be moving here in the next few years will find those small businesses and fall in love with them just like we have growing up here. All right. Well, thank you, Mari.
Thank you.
So
guys.
I do encourage, if you have not had Navarro's, their food is delicious.
Thank you.
And if you stop in there, I love the plaque that has the history from when it was started by your grandparents and your mother being an owner.
Thank you.
So I think it's I love that plaque. And I hope that wherever, if you guys move to next, that'll be there as well.
Yes.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to Muskegon Rising. And we look forward to connecting with you guys on the next episode.